Jordan is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to thank our witnesses for being here today, especially Ms. Owens for coming. I apologize I couldn't be here for some of the earlier parts of the hearing. I had an amendment on the floor that we were managing. But I did walk in a few minutes ago, and Mr. Meadows and I were visiting in the back room, and noticed that Ms. Owens, you hadn't spoke for a while. So if there's something you'd like to add to the discussion over the last few minutes, I'd be happy to yield my 4 minutes to you and let you comment. But thank you again for your outstanding testimony, for being here as our witness today.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I was just commenting backstage, back behind the chambers, that it is quite ironic that I'm the only Black American that's sitting here, and yet the people that called this hearing haven't asked me a single question about my experience. I think that probably points to what I say the larger issue is that Democrats come up with the problems, they come up with the solutions, and Black Americans are basically used as props for them to get out their narrative and to ultimately control our vote using fear tactics. I also found it quite hilarious that when asked for actual numbers, nobody here could actually provide them, because it's not actually a problem in America, or a major problem or a threat that's facing Black America. This is, again, just election rhetoric. This is, again, just an attempt to assault an administration that is doing all that they can to help Black America in every single regard, whether it's criminal justice reform, whether it's talking about real issues like school choice, which should be implemented to conquer some of these illiteracy rates that is actually harming the Black community. And I think it's unfortunate that we have this many hearings on something that is so small in America, and we aren't having real hearings. I actually don't think the Democrats have completed a single day of real work since Donald J. Trump went into office. This has just been about attacking his administration day in and day out with things that do not matter. I am hopeful that we will come to a point where we actually have hearings about things that matter in America, things that are a threat to America, like illegal immigration, which is a threat to Black America, like socialism, which is a threat to every single American. And I hope that we see that day. It's definitely not going to be today. Fortunately, we have Republicans that are fighting every single day, day in and day out. And I will wrap this up by saying what I said at the beginning of my testimony, which is that for all of the Democrat colleagues that are hoping that this is going to work and that we're going to have a fearful Black America at the polls, if you're paying attention to the stuff that I'm paying attention to, the conversation is cracking. People are getting tired of this rhetoric. We're being tired that we are being told by you guys to hate people based on the color of their skin or to be fearful. We want results. We want policies. We are tired of rhetoric. And the numbers show that white supremacy and white nationalism is not a problem that is harming Black America. Let's start talking about putting fathers back in the home. Let's start talking about God and religion and shrinking government, because government has destroyed Black American homes, and every single one of you know that. And I think many people should feel ashamed for what we have done and what Congress has turned into. It's days of our lives in here, and it's embarrassing.
I thank the lady for her comments, and Ms. Owens, thank you for being here today as our witness. And with that, I would yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentleman. Let's see. Has everyone gone here, Mr. Meadows? Okay, well, but I definitely want to take a few more minutes, and anyone else who has closing thoughts or questions, I'm going to invite them to do it. Obviously, I resist the suggestion that our hearing is something that doesn't matter and that it's somehow a distraction from truly important business. The title of our hearing is Confronting Violent White Supremacy, Addressing the Transnational Terrorist Threat. Let me just quickly ask the other witnesses to respond. Would you say this is something that does not matter? I know that you are all professional experts on the subject and have devoted your careers to it. How do you respond to the idea that this is something that doesn't matter compared to God and religion, for example, which were offered? Dr. Geltzer.
Well, as somebody who once had counterterrorism in my title, I obviously think that any form of violence, extremism matters, and part of what makes terrorism so distinctive is that whatever the numbers might be about those killed in particular attacks, obviously tragic for those people, but terrorism has an outsized effect. It transcends those numbers. It leads to political backlash at times. It divides communities. It polarizes. That's why many of us who work on terrorism and counterterrorism think that it can't be reduced to the numbers killed, though those are acts of tragedy in and of themselves, but it's that idea that taking whatever your view of political goals and pursuing it through violence, that's disruptive to society as we know it. And that's why I think it's an important conversation we're having.
Well, thank you for that point. I mean, I suppose someone could look at the casualties that our nation experienced at 9/11 and say that was smaller than the total number of people killed in gun violence or in drunk driving that year, but that doesn't capture the political, the social, the emotional, the interpersonal reality of an act of terrorism. Dr. Blue, what is your response to the idea that it's something that doesn't really matter?
Well, we have a history of treating it like it doesn't matter, and the result of that has been death and destruction, and the disruption of all kinds of people's lives. I suppose I would point to kind of two historical examples to understand this a little bit better. One is this idea that it's hilarious, my co-panelist says, that there are no numbers, that the numbers show, she says, that this is not a problem, and she points out that none of us give the numbers. I'd like to talk for a minute about why we don't have the numbers, if I may. From the outset, surveillance in the United States has been a profoundly political project, so we can go all the way back to the 1960s and think about how things like the FBI counterintelligence program were unequally targeted. COINTELPRO, people in this room might know, was a project that sought to disrupt fringe activism on both the left and on the right. But we know from the history that it was profoundly more focused on the left and on activists of color than on the right. So Klan groups were infiltrated, but there were no deaths of Klan activists in this period at the hands of FBI informants, nor was there a cohesive effort to disrupt those groups the way that there was on the left. Similarly, our resources have been overwhelmingly dedicated to confronting Islamic or international terror rather than white or domestic terror. The reason we don't have these numbers is because there hasn't been an aggregating data project within the federal government. The watchdogs that have been in charge of aggregating this data have had their own motivations and their own reasons for using different kinds of data collection practices. I just have to say that I object strenuously to your use of the word hilarious. To me, this feels a lot like your reaction to being named in one of these manifestos. Now, you're, of course, not responsible for the words of somebody writing that document. But I do think that laughing at it is a real problem, because these are real families that are impacted by this violence. And I think our efforts towards talking about this have to start from a place of mutual respect, which is what I've heard from this side of the table. Now, the reason we don't have those numbers, I want those numbers as much as you do, but to say the numbers don't show something is simply not supported by the data.
Okay, and I have 38 seconds left, Ms. Mulligan, if you want to respond within that time.
The only thing I would add is that it's in the name. Terrorism, domestic terrorism, it terrorizes us. It terrorizes us in our homes. It terrorizes us in our schools. And to the points made by the other panelists, it is disproportionate to its impact on any individual life, and it's not.
You reject the idea it's something that doesn't matter, or it doesn't really matter?
Absolutely reject.
Okay. All right, so here's where we are. Every member now has had 5 minutes and... I'll go ahead and claim my 5 minutes. Okay, and Mr. Clay, so we have 2 members who have not. So I'm going to go to the 2 members who have not yet, and we'll give an opportunity for a closing thought to any member who wants before we go.
Am I next to respond, or is Mr. Meadows?
I thought Mr. Meadows was
Mr.
next.
Meadows, okay.
Mr. Meadows is next, then Mr. Clay, then to you, Mr. Jordan.
Ms. Owens, obviously this is a gang up on you. You know, we're giving these witnesses the ability to do a rebuttal on you, and so you know, I find it unfair, Ms. Ballou. I mean, you know, candidly, for you to show mutual respect and then you to go after Ms. Owens, it's not appropriate. So, Ms. Owens, you can have 4 minutes and 34 seconds to respond. However,
yield for a second.
I'll yield to the.
Thank you. I believe, Ms. Owens, when you used the word hilarious, it was referencing the fact that no one had asked you a question. It wasn't to the subject matter of the hearing. Is that right?
That is correct.
And to have another witness insinuate something that is not accurate is just not appropriate, Mr. Chairman, for how witnesses are supposed to behave in front of this committee. I also think you didn't say it doesn't matter about the subject matter of today's hearing. You said there are other subjects that matter as well, and maybe we should spend some time on those. Is that accurate?
That is correct, and they matter much, 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 much more, and I have said that. I said that in my opening, and I will say it again. You know that white supremacy and white nationalism ranks nowhere near the top of the issues that are facing Black America. And the reason that you are bringing them up in this room is because it is attempt to make the election all about race, as the Democrats
Not in
do.
my case, Ms.
Please don't
Owens.
cut
I'm
me
sorry.
off.
Please do not characterize my motive.
Mr. Chairman, it's my time.
Yeah,
It's my time.
You've got your time, Mr. Meadows. I'll give you 3 more seconds.
Every 4 years, you bring up race, and you knew exactly what I meant when I said hilarious, and you just tried to do live what the media does all the time to Republicans, to our president, and to conservatives, which is you tried to manipulate what I said to fit your narrative, okay? I was not referring to the subject matter that is hilarious. I said it's hilarious that we are sitting in this room today, and I've got 2 doctors and a missus, and nobody can give us real numbers that we can respond to so we can assess how big of a threat this is, because you know that it is not as big of a threat as you are trying to make it out to be so that you can manipulate. And the audacity of you to bring up the Christchurch shooting manifesto and make it seem as if I laughed at people that were slaughtered by a homicidal maniac is, in my opinion, absolutely despicable. And I think that we should be above that. To try to assign reality or any meaning to a homicidal maniac writing a manifesto, which, by the way, let the record show, also stated Spyro the Dragon, the child's cartoon, as a source of inspiration. He also cited Nelson Mandela as a source of information. I don't think that Nelson Mandela has inspired mosque shootings. You can correct me if you think I'm wrong. You would rather assign meaning to a homicidal maniac than to actually address the things that I said today that are actually harming Black America. Number 1, father absence. Number 2, the education system and the illiteracy rate. Illegal immigration ranks high, abortion ranks high, white supremacy and white nationalism, if I had to make a list again of 100 things, would not be on it. This hearing, in my opinion, is a farce, and it is ironic that you're sitting here and you're having 3 Caucasian people testify and tell you what their expertise are. Do I know what my expertise are? Black in America. I've been Black in America my whole life, all 30 years, and I can tell you that you guys have done the exact same thing every 4 years ahead of an election cycle, and it needs to stop.
I'll yield back.